Good morning and welcome to Home Retreats, to our reflection today on Bernadette and the Apparitions of Lourdes. From the Gospel of St Matthew. At that time Jesus exclaimed, "I bless you, Father, Lord of heaven and of earth, for hiding these things from the learned and clever, and revealing them to mere children. Yes, Father, for that is what it pleased you to do." The huge impact of Lourdes on the Catholic imagination can make us forget just how relatively recent in history it is. By 1858, when Bernadette first came to prominence, the railway age and the age of mass travel and communication had already begun. And so the clash between religious faith and extreme rationalism was well established. So when reports emerged of supposed visions in a remote Pyrenean village, there were very, very different responses. Some locals eagerly jumped the gun, immediately assuming what Bernadette had been very careful not to presume to begin with, that the Virgin Mary had definitely appeared. For others, this was merely a sign that a simple-minded, illiterate peasant girl had a taste for sensation and fame. So given the widespread caricature of a wide-eyed, credulous naïve, it's striking to see how sober, moderate, and steadfast under pressure this uncoached 14-year-old girl was, and speaks powerfully of the restrictions she placed on herself not to go beyond what she had seen. So it may help to have a brief summary of the 18 apparitions to give us a sense of a shape of what Bernadette experienced, how she conveyed what she experienced, and perhaps a final roundup of what we might take away from this. It all began on the 11th of February 1858. Bernadette, her sister and a friend went to collect firewood. On crossing the river Gave to reach wood which they saw piled under the grotto of Massabielle, Bernadette heard a noise she described like a gust of wind. On turning, she saw a light in a niche high above the ground, where she saw a young girl dressed in white. Bernadette instinctively took out her rosary and tried to make the sign of the cross. But she could not do so, she found, until the young girl first did it herself. After the young girl silently passed the beads through her fingers, she vanished. Bernadette reluctantly told her sister, who then blurted out the story to their mother. 3 days later, on the second apparition occurred. In the meantime, Bernadette's sister had helpfully told all her friends, and it took some effort for Bernadette's father to reluctantly allow her to return to the grotto, but with holy water as a precaution, in case there were an evil spirit. Bernadette ran ahead, prayed the rosary, and a prayer of exorcism, sprinkling holy water. When she was asked, Bernadette said she had seen a young girl with a rosary on her arm. Her mother was ready to beat her, and though she was persuaded not to, she scolded Bernadette and said she was not to return, as this was clearly an illusion. 4 days later, on February the 18th, a local woman persuaded Bernadette's mother to allow her to return after all. And when Bernadette again saw the young girl, she did not herself assume who she'd seen. And when she was asked, she constantly used the word aquero in the local dialect, meaning that one. Bernadette described her voice as delicate and soft the first time she'd heard the young girl speak, and was asked, "Would you have the kindness to come here for 15 days? I do not promise to make you happy in this world, but in the next." 2 days later, at her aunt's request, Bernadette brought a blessed candle to the grotto for this and for future visits. Numbers of those present began to climb, from 8 to 30, and then by February the 21st, as many as 100. Bernadette remained in a silent ecstasy, and the onlookers eagerly awaited some clear sign on the last of the 15 days. Rumours began to grow wild. On February the 21st, Bernadette was brought to the police commissioner, Jacomet, and she consistently denied her claiming to have seen the Virgin Mary. Under cross-examination, she was consistent on details. A carer, she said, was a real living person who smiled and talked like us, but she avoided using any precise word to describe her. In appearance, she said, she had a white dress with blue sash, a white veil, a yellow rose on each foot, with rosary beads in her hands. Despite the threats of jail, Bernadette remained firm and defended what she had said. On the 23rd of February, the seventh apparition saw 150 witnesses at the grotto, including some of local well-to-do society. One of them, Jean-Baptiste Estrade, who had attended the police interrogation, was impressed and convinced by Bernadette's demeanour and said to himself, "That child has a supernatural being with her." Several days later, Bernadette struggled to pass through 300 onlookers who were worried by what they saw as her change of colour during her period of ecstasy. They could hear nothing of the dialogue between Bernadette and the young girl. Bernadette nodded and replied yes and no to the vision. When asked, she said a carer had asked for penance and prayer to God for the conversion of sinners, and Bernadette had been asked to kiss the ground for this. On the 25th of February, the ninth apparition saw 350 attend the grotto. Bernadette again was in a state of ecstasy and walking on her knees, as she had been doing until interrupted by the crowd the day before. This time they were shocked to see her scrabble in the ground to find water, and then see her gather and eat leaves. And Bernadette explained, "A carer told me to go drink at the spring and wash in it. Initially I went to the Gave, but was beckoned to go under the rock. The water was dirty, so I threw it away 3 times. At the 4th time, I succeeded, and was told, 'You will eat the grass that is there.' That same evening, a number of grotto visitors noticed water trickling from the hole Bernadette had dug. Others dug, drew water and drank. More water flowed, and it became clearer. A patch of mud was turning into clear water, and the message of conversion was clear. 2 bottles of water were taken to town that day. One went to the son of the tobacconist who had an eye patch, and in following days, after drinking the water, it was seen that the patch was removed." Next, the police prosecutor, Vital Dutour, then sought to intimidate Bernadette from approaching the grotto ever again. But he was surprised by her consistency, and he lost his thread. Although Bernadette was warned to stay away, she refused to promise. The story grew, and in the eyes of locals, the prosecutor lost much credibility. On the 27th of February, larger crowds appeared, and Bernadette repeated her acts of penance, but with no words recorded this time. The head of the high school questioned her and was impressed by her naivety and charm, and she explained the purpose of the acts of penance as first for myself, then for others. By the end of the month, the 11th apparition, as many as 1,100 people had gathered. Bernadette again repeated her acts of penance and was stopped by the local official responsible for managing springs and fountains. She then had to undergo a 3rd interrogation and was again threatened with jail. The local high school headmaster, Antoine Clarence, had been turned off by the dirty water and grass episode, but he found Bernadette to be calm, natural and concise, with no sign of hallucination. Also, Father Désiré, a priest not from Lourdes, attended, unaware of the local priest, Father Péramal's ban on clergy going to the grotto. What a difference, he said later, between the girl she was then and the girl I saw at the moment of the apparition. Respect, silence, recollection reigned everywhere. I thought I was in the vestibule of paradise. At the beginning of March, the 12th of the 18 apparitions took place. And in this time took place the first of 7 miracles which the bishop would eventually regard as the work of God. A young woman 9 months pregnant, who had paralyzed fingers from an accident, plunged her hands into the water, and her fingers suddenly regained their suppleness. Grabbing her 2 children by the hand, she hurried home 7 kilometers and went almost immediately into labor, without help and almost without pain. The young child, Jean-Baptiste, would eventually become a priest. On March the 2nd, the 13th apparition, after her ecstasy before 1,600 onlookers, Bernadette headed for the rectory to see Father Pérumal. She had been given a message, she said, "Go and tell the priests that people are to come here in procession and to build a chapel here." Father Pérumal realized the conflict that processions would bring with the state authorities. Bernadette must ask the lady her name before anything more could be done. On the next day, March the 3rd, Bernadette attended the grotto alongside 3,000 others. She was disturbed by the fact that the lady did not appear in the morning session, but later that day she did do, with a new request for a chapel. Bernadette, in response to the priest's request, again asked for her name, but only received a smile. Significantly, however, the priest was struck by the greater fervour among locals and signs of conversion after these events. He asked Bernadette to ask for a sign for the grotto's rosebush to flower. Then, he said, a chapel could be built. The 15th apparition on the 4th of March was the last of the 15 days. The police commissioner had inspected the site for fake machinery or fireworks, and a huge crowd, at least 8,000 strong, gathered. Bernadette seemed to be speaking to someone invisible for at least 45 minutes, but no miracle or revelation emerged. Bernadette told Father Pérumal that the lady merely smiled when asked for her name and for the rosebush to flower, but she still wanted a chapel. The initial public disappointment was countered by news of a dramatic healing of near blindness in a girl who had washed in the spring. But this turned out to be a false alarm. Under questioning, Bernadette declared, "I do not believe I have cured anyone, and have done nothing to that end. I do not know if I will return to the grotto any more." The 16th, 2 from the end, apparition on March the 25th, began after Bernadette was awakened from sleep by a new urge to visit the grotto. Her parents were reluctant, but by 5 in the morning she set out. This time she was determined to get an answer to the question from Father Pérumal, and very politely asked the lady 4 times. On the final occasion, Akero raised her eyes to the sky and said, "Que soy era Immaculada Concepción." I am the Immaculate Conception. Bernadette, completely befuddled by these words, repeated them continually on the way to the rectory so she could not forget them. Father Pérumal was astounded. She could clearly not have invented this. The penultimate apparition on the 7th of April saw 1,000 people attend. And as confirmed by a local doctor, a candle flame between Bernadette's fingers, licking her fingers, afterwards was seen to have created no damage. Afterwards, Bernadette withdrew from public view. The local prefect wanted her restrained as mentally ill. From June the 13th, the grotto was barricaded several times, but locals responded by tearing the barriers down. The final apparition on July the 16th involved Bernadette having to stay on the opposite bank as the grotto had been boarded off. No words were exchanged, and Bernadette later said, "I saw neither the boards nor the garve. It seemed to me that I was in the grotto, no more distant than the other times, and I saw only the Holy Virgin." So to conclude, from such a rich and extraordinary saga, what can we make of this? Perhaps what might strike us above all is integrity. Bernadette is caught up completely against her expectation in events she would never have foreseen. But she neither flinches from the task that is given her, nor does she embroider the facts. She faithfully passes on what she receives. Also, considering the extreme poverty of the Subiro family, at no stage does she take the opportunity to profit financially or otherwise from the events. When coins are passed to her, she drops them, saying they burn her hands. Her poverty of spirit and her longing for obscurity are a sharp challenge to our present-day obsession with celebrity and the cult of me. So perhaps if, when we next reflect on the Beatitudes, we might reflect on Bernadette's example under at least two of these. Blessed are the poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, they shall inherit the earth. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.